It is all over. You spend weeks, months talking about it, and in a matter of 3 days, it comes and goes. But a very productive 3 day draft for the Arizona Cardinals. As we welcome you into a special edition of Cards Cover 2 presented by Hyundai, proud partner of the Arizona Cardinals, recapping Saturday, day 3, and of course, a little bit big picture, but we'll save that for later next week because we really just want to focus on what the Cardinals here, MD, did on Saturday. They had 4 draft picks. Okay, if you want to add in the 5th round selection of Kenyon Drake, I'll throw it in there. But 4 draft picks, 3 of them addressing the defensive side of the ball. And as general manager Steve Keim mentioned often, he vowed to fix this defense, and that is what he did during the draft and, of course, in free agency as well.
Well, it sounds like he felt like a lot of Cardinal fans leaving the stadium, at least home games, where he obviously, when he said he left the stadium, that was one of his promises to himself and the organization. I got to get this thing fixed, and I think it was important, Craig, when they retained Larry Fitzgerald. Obviously, it was Fitz's decision, but he didn't wait. They got DJ Humphries done. They were able to tender and sign Kenyon Drake on a 1-year deal. They brought Justin Murray back. They obviously re-signed Marcus Gilbert and then Max Garcia. So I think the heavy lifting was done on the offense. So obviously, we'll talk about this next week, but Isaiah Simmons, that was just the best player available, jack of all trades. And so all of a sudden you could focus on the defense. And we focused so much on the offseason about getting that front 7 better. And whether it was in free agency or the draft, they really committed about stopping the run and putting pressure on the quarterback.
Here are the team's 4 draft picks on Saturday, and we'll break them down individually. Sure. But the 114th overall pick, 4th round, first of 2 in the 4th round, defensive tackle Leki Fotu out of Utah. And then the 131st overall selection, another defensive tackle, Rashard Lawrence out of LSU. Then the Cardinals had a little bit of a wait. They didn't pick again until the 6th round, number 202 overall, linebacker Evan Weaver out of Cal. And in their final selection, 7th round, 222nd overall, they went offense right down the street at Arizona State, running back Eno Benjamin. But let's go back to the 4th round, MJ, and take a look at those 2 selections again. Both defensive linemen, both defensive tackles, big bodies, but the first one, Leki Fotu, 6'5", 330 pounds, basically described as a run stuffer, and based off his physical frame, you can see why that's the description attached to his name.
Yeah, so for some reason, when the Cardinals had guys like Deuce Latui, they're just built a little bit different way. Mike Upati, I mean, they're just big bodies, and you look at him, and when you watch some of the highlights, yeah, he's not a guy. He's probably your first and second down lineman because on 3rd down you want to bring in guys that can win some one-on-one matchups. But he's able to push the pocket back. He's good against the run, and we talked about it. Getting someone that can either split a double team or create a double team. And you throw in a Jordan Phillips. So the Cardinals definitely made a commitment to that front 7 because it's not only getting to the quarterback, but you also want to be able to stop the run and you want to be more physical. And they got younger and more athletic based on the draft.
Fotu, a first-team All-Pac-12 performer, both as a junior and a senior, and then a 3rd-team AP All-American as a senior, in which he had 29 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups in 13 starts. A late entry, though, into football. He's got some older brothers who played the sport, but he really got started in rugby and then kind of transitioned to football. So we know he's used to the physicality, and in fact, it's something that he relishes because there's no fear now. At rugby, you don't have any pads. You put the pads on, and he maybe is a little bit more aggressive than he might be compared to someone else.
I always like guys that either played rugby or they wrestled in high school or had some in college because those guys, they're willing to get dirty. They're willing to get bloody. And when you look at those guys, they don't back down from anybody. And, they showed his family and it looked like they were having a good time and obviously having a meal. But these guys, I mean, they come from just a different background to where it's you against the world. And so I like the fact that, he came in, said all the right things, but I think he's going to be able to be a rotation guy. And when you start looking at it from that standpoint, we know that when you play a 3-4, you're probably going to keep 6 to 7 linemen at least active on game day. and get that rotation going where you don't have to play 65 snaps a game. So I like it. But obviously it's going to be a different level from him, obviously going to the NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see when he gets kind of comfortable to where he can just let loose, because initially you're thinking a lot. And again, we got to mention this: these rookies aren't going to get the same offseason that normally we have in the past.
No, it's a good point to make. Good news, by the way, for Fotu. He expects to come in, quote, fully healthy. He was red flagged at the Senior Bowl, but now is okay. And then, of course, the other defensive tackle, LSU standout, Rashard Lawrence, not as big, 6'2", 308, but does anchor that inside the interior of the defensive line, has shown the ability to rush the quarterback. But again, you want to stop the run. That's something we always heard Vance Joseph talk about. Priority number one, stopping the run. And the Cardinals in the 4th round, not once, but twice, adding defensive tackles that they believe are run stuffers.
Yeah, and you look at who the Cardinals drafted some of these players, obviously, Power 5 conferences. And, Lawrence is a guy that if you went to the Fiesta Bowl, you got a chance to see him play. Now, he gets kind of lost in the shuffle with all those Clemson players being drafted, over the last few years. Or LSU, excuse me. But when you look at him, he looks like he's got small arms. And so that's why you can hide him inside. I like to see his motor go a little bit more, but he has the ability. You could see if he's not going to make the play, he'll still kind of shuffle down the line to try to knife through there. And some of those highlights, he's able to get tackled for losses. But I'd like to see a little bit more energy. Because of his short length of arms, you're definitely going to play him inside. I don't see him ending up on the outside at all.
You bring up the Fiesta Bowl, the defensive player of the game a couple of years back against Central Florida. But here's someone who is a 3-year starter and a 3-year captain. We know Keim loves those leaders in the locker room and has the tendency to draft guys that are leaders on the college ranks as well. Interesting to hear from Lawrence when he addressed the media that he didn't have a lot of contact with the Cardinals during the pre-draft process, but heard behind the scenes that the Cardinals were very high on him. One particular reason why, Vance Joseph's brother, Mickey Joseph, the wide receivers coach at LSU. So some intel there that perhaps no other team in the NFL has when you're talking about Rashard Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the NFL is about, relationships. I mean, we talked about it yesterday with Kingsbury, with Dana Holgerson. Steve Keim mentions he knows this defensive line coach here. I mean, that's about a relationship. Yeah, so that's interesting. I had no idea that Vance had a brother coaching.
Well, now every time we see Coach Joseph, we'll have to ask. And see, now that cat's out of the bag. We'll have to figure out what other prospects are coming out of LSU or wherever his brother might be.
Well, that's fascinating, because I would have thought when you said that he had some intel, I would have thought maybe the agent knew about it. But here they had really good intel. So that's interesting to see.
So 2 defensive tackles, and then once again, defense, the selection in the 6th round. Evan Weaver, 6'2", 237, an inside linebacker. And the way to describe him, just a tackling machine. Last year, MJ led the country with 182 tackles, 103 solo tackles. The year prior, 4th in the country in tackles with 159. This guy has great instincts on where that football is going to be every single snap.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, he was a player of the year. So when you look at it from that standpoint, he's undersized. It looks like he's a guy that's going to play with a lot of energy. He's been doubted his whole life, kind of an overachiever. But according to Steve and Cliff, when they got a chance to meet him, they kind of had a, whoa, calm down a little bit. But his football IQ, he's got a nose for the ball. You mentioned some of the numbers. Maybe he's going to be that special teams guy that's willing to run down there and put his body on the line.
Well, he had the best quote of the day when asked about why he is such a good tackler and why he likes football. It's because he can hit people as hard as I possibly can. I really like taking the soul out of people.
Okay. Again, I can appreciate it. As Steve said, just calm it down a little bit. I mean, you don't want to hurt anybody. I know what he's saying, but sometimes you got to couch your words a little bit.
Yeah, began his college career as a defensive end and then was moved to linebacker. And then as we talk about guys with chips on their shoulder, like Isaiah Simmons, like Josh Jones, not highly recruited out of high school. So these guys have always been kind of under the radar. Now they've got to reprove themselves all over again. And someone that we all know, having watched him play at Arizona State, the Cardinals, who had Benjamin available to them in the 6th round, passed on him, went with Weaver. Their pick in the 7th round, number 222, came up. Benjamin available, and he became the selection. 5'9", 207 running back. We know he was great at ASU, but what really stood out to him or to everyone else in the NFL is what he was able to show at the Senior Bowl at the scouting combine, was his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And that, if you're going to be successful at the NFL as a running back, you got to be able to do that.
Yeah, we know that they devalue the running back position unless you're, we only had a couple of guys go in the first 35 picks. So I'm not going to, say he made a bad decision because, first of all, if he goes back, he risks his injuries. There's no guarantees. But I've always heard he's been a third-day guy, which is rounds 4 through 7. And he admitted that he thought he was going to go earlier. And the problem is you start to hear stuff. But great kid. I think he can provide something from the return game. You mentioned it. Obviously he's going to be in competition probably with DJ Foster after Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake. But he's a guy that can do a couple different things. I don't know what he does special, but I know he's a guy that can get through the tackles. He could bounce outside. The Cardinals really don't have a third down back, but I like when the Cardinals draft local guys. It's a great story. And even though we didn't have a camera on him, I could tell that, by the 6th round, I would love to know how many other teams were calling him. And for our viewers and listeners out there, what happens is, teams start getting on the phone, their scouts and coaches, and they say, hey, if you don't get drafted, we want to bring you here. And then their agents will get involved. How much money are you going to give me? And what's the opportunity? So I'm sure his phone was ringing. He was going to be in an NFL camp. But these guys grow up, just want to hear their name called. I don't care if it was the last pick in the draft. That's the goal in life. And for some of these other guys, they're going to have to take a different path. But I'm glad he got drafted because he was a really productive player in college.